Thank you for watching this video lesson on the upcoming Sunday school lesson, Transform. It is a great lesson for the first Sunday of the new year, particularly as there will be class members who will be thinking about New Year's resolutions and starting and doing something new. Because what happens with Jacob is he has to be transformed. So let's take just a few moments and let me just kind of walk through the lesson and give you some ideas that may be helpful in spurring your ideas and teaching the lesson. Now, one of the things I found about this lesson is the teaching suggestions at the end of the study I found to be very helpful. I supplemented them a little bit with some other ideas, and I'll talk with you about those things and give you some thoughts on some of the text. But I'm hoping that you'll see the power of this lesson. First of all, look at the lesson truth. It says God transforms people for use in His plans. That word, transform, means more than change. The word transform means to radically change. For Jacob to be used by God, he has to be radically changed. The other thing about Jacob is when we've been studying his life, what we've noticed is this man fundamentally, deep down in his character, is a rascal. His name means deceiver or cheat. He's a flim-flam man. He's a con artist. That's who he is at the very core of his being. For him to be used by God, there has to be a transformation. So what we're studying about is not just something that happens at the edge of his life. It's not an incremental change that happens to Jacob. Jacob becomes a man who is fundamentally pulled inside out. And what we need to understand about the lesson is saying we can be used by God, but we have to become transformed. There have to be some things in our lives that have to be radically transformed. Now the lesson starts out, the suggestions on the back, with a list of things that are common items that are used to change the appearance or some kind of an object. And we see this advertisement on television this time of year. There's Nutrisystem if you want to transform in terms of your health and your weight. There's smoking ads. One ad says that some people takes 30 times before they can stop smoking. There's all these ads out there appealing to the fact that fundamentally all of us know we have to change. And we recognize how difficult it is because we need something else to help us change. We need support. We need help. And this lesson says Jacob learned something that is fundamental to there being radical transformation in a person's life, and that is we need God's help. Now, you'll notice the lesson starts, the first point, with something called the match. That's the title of it. And it's Genesis 32, verse 24 to 26. And those verses say, Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not defeat him, he struck Jacob's hip as they wrestled and dislocated his hip. Then he said to Jacob, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." Now there's some good suggestions here in the lesson plan about how to teach this lesson. But the thing that you want to drive home, I believe, in this section called the match, is it's found in a statement found in this section called review. And it's simply this: he needed God to transform his life. That's what I think you're wanting to drive at when you're talking about these verses. God initiates it. Jacob doesn't ask for this. God initiates the transformation. And God initiates that transformation in our life. He doesn't wait till we come to Him and ask us. He is already dealing with us. He's already speaking to us. He's touching something in every person in your class that says to them, this is an area, Ed, I want you to change. And what we want to drive home in this lesson is this could not happen with Jacob. If Jacob could have done it, he would have done it in the past 20 years when he was with Laban. But he couldn't do it. He had to need God. Now, what's the takeaway with that? We all recognize we need God for transformation. Well, I think the takeaway is found in this statement where it says review, and the last statement of that, in the word say, and it says, true transformation leads believers to value and seek God's blessing above all else. So the question is that you want to deal with in the class, how do we show that we value this? I mean, it's one thing to say, I need God's help, but it's something altogether to actually take the actions necessary in order to have God work in our life in transformation. So if you valued that, if you really put it as a priority, it was no longer an issue of I can take it or leave it, but I really need this transformation. What would that look like for a believer? Now, for someone who wants to use weight loss, it means they get up and they spend the money and they buy Nutrisystem, or they go on a walk, or they begin an exercise program, spend the money to do something of that nature, or they buy the things to help them stop smoking. But the point of it is they have valued that enough to actually take an action. So what would that look like this year if that thing that God's dealing with them was to be transformed? The next section is called the title. That's verses 27 to 29. And it says, "What is your name?" the man asked. "Jacob," he replied. Now in Hebrew, there is a way to ask a person what their name is. My name's Ed, what's yours? There's a way to ask that in Hebrew. But the way this is designed in Hebrew is he's not asking just for his name. He's asking something deeper, as you understand from your studies. He's asking, what's your character? And so when Jacob answers with his name, he's not just giving the title. He's describing who he really is. He's confessing. In verse 28 it says, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, it will be Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he answered, "Why do you ask my name?" And he blessed him there. Now in this section, called the title, what's happening here is this issue of honesty. That's what needs to be taking place in this discussion in the class. Jacob gets honest. Now, for a man to break his addiction to alcohol, he has to get honest enough in an AA meeting to stand up and confess, "I'm an alcoholic." And so often what happens is we may admit it, but do we really get down to being honest? This is who I am. And so I'd suggest that you think about how you could talk about that in the class. It has, in the teaching lesson, under the word direct, breaking people up into teams and having them look up things in the quarterly. And I have never found that to be very helpful in the class situations that I'm in. But I can say to the class, would you look at your quarterly and tell me, what does your quarterly tell you about Jacob, the name Jacob? And then what does it say about the name Israel? What does it say about the name of God? And that may be helpful in helping them see that the quarterly is valuable and to study it. And one of the things I'd suggest as a way to maybe apply this section, talking about the title, is to just talk through what would it look like if someone got honest and named their issue. So I gave the class that I taught an example. What if we said our name was apathy? And God said to us, "I want you to be zealous." So, apathy. We believe in God. God has a part in our life, but He's not critical. He's not priority. He really doesn't have that impact upon our value system, upon the schedule of our day. But what would it take to move our name from apathy to where God is the central issue of our life? When we make decisions, we consult Him and what would be pleasing to Him more than anything else. When it comes to the spending of our time, we're going to spend time with God, come what may. So what would it take to move from apathy, naming myself apathy, to zealous? Now in the class I taught, I thought I was picking a safe subject, but I could tell as we talked about that was a very applicable subject to the class as we talked about that. Now, just to wrap up, the third point is the subject of venue, the venue. And he changes the name. He gives the place where he's at a name called Peniel. And it's a way of remembrance. It's a way of recalling again the commitment that he made. And I thought one of the insightful things the Sunday school lesson suggested to us was thinking of ways that we could memorialize our commitment. And so oftentimes I think that may be the reason why our transforming commitments don't last. It's because we haven't built in a way to remember, to repeat. And that has something to do with the application of them not eating meat that's connected with the hip joint. Jacob dies, he goes on, but they continue to have this repeated practice that reminds them of this transforming impact upon Christ. And you might want to lead them to ask and discuss, how do we memorialize things? What are the things we do to memorialize that? And we do all kinds of things. We put things on the calendar. We write songs. We write about it. We get symbols to remind us of those kinds of things. Just think about the way we memorialize our events. And maybe that is the key this year to seeing a definite transformation in that area that we've been wrestling with God. I think this is a great lesson I'm excited about for you. It was a fun time for me when I taught it on Wednesday. I think it'll be a fun time for you as well. God bless.